Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this month's episode of Soul Empowerment Feel to Heal. I am Gail Nowak. I am going to be your host today, unless David is able to join us a little bit later. He's having some power outages. So, Sarah and Scott and I will be joining you for the show. Hopefully, David can join us in a little bit. And we are going to dive into the topic of healing and feelings and exploring and challenging some of the common notions like having to hide your feelings or love is conditional, or maybe we can just sort of bypass some of those difficult and unwanted circumstances in our life and not have to deal with them. So some of the points that we're going to be addressing today include spiritual bypassing, making friends with all of our feelings, learned behaviors, manipulation, emotional manipulation, and healing that emotional manipulation, and the power of curiosity. So thank you again for joining us. It's going to be a really fun, exciting, and deep conversation as usual. And I'm going to ask Sarah and Scott to introduce yourselves, and then we'll dive right in. So I'm going to go in the order I see you on my screen. So Sarah, you are up.
Hi, I'm Sarah, or Sarah Jane. I'm in the UK. I'm a complementary health therapist, mainly working with energy such as Reiki and sound in the form of toning. I feel like specializing in working with people to heal the inner child. And I very much encourage everybody that it is important to love yourself first, and that there's nothing selfish about that. If we take care of ourselves, we will have the energy to be able to take care of others and bring that love that we feel for ourselves to others as well.
And I am
Thank you.
Scott Holmes. I'm up in Boston, Reiki master, polarity therapist, et al. I think most of us do have a number of those, and they can go on forever. And I really specialize in helping professional men and women come back into their bodies. In order to do that, they have to be able to accept that they are coming into their heart. And in order to do that, they have to feel. To do that, they have to heal. So all of this ties in. Everything that I deal with, it's a very, very similar process in that they have to find themselves before they can really fully be present within themselves. And for whatever reason, I just went off, and I hope this doesn't start again. Today is a day of technical difficulties. And so I love this topic, and carry on. I'll be right there.
So this is what we call a sourced experience, when things go a little bit as unexpected, and it's really a challenge for us to rise to the occasion. So I love that we're all rising to the occasion together, despite the technical difficulties, despite not being able to necessarily be physically present in the moment on this episode for David. So I'm going to introduce myself, and then we're going to dive right into having a really meaty conversation about this. So I'm Gail Nowak. I am also in the Boston area, on the other side of Boston from Scott, on the North Shore. And I help spirit-led coaches and healers create authentic, healthy business relationships without hiding or silencing themselves, so that they can communicate boldly, lead lovingly, and make the world a better place. I do that through energy first, healing centered coaching and retreats that really help you transform your message, your presence, and your results. So that's me, that's us. Welcome in. And let's get started here. I'd love to hear from each of you, Sarah and Scott. You know, this whole path to healing, the journey of healing, and unlearning certain lessons that are ingrained in us from a young age, unlearning the social conditioning that we receive either from family or culture or religion, and really like waking up to that and understanding that it's a choice, that it's a choice to take that on as our own, and then understanding that we have the power within to really get acquainted to who we truly are. And what I'd love to hear from both of you or from each of you is, what was that journey like for you? And I know we've talked about it in other episodes in other ways, but I've been having this conversation with some of my clients and some of my colleagues. And some people talk about having like an instant awakening to healing and the spiritual path, and then others talk about how it's kind of been an ongoing process. So why don't we start there and share a little bit. Scott, I'm going to start with you. Share a little bit about how you even became aware of this, number one, of your feelings, your true feelings, and number two, aware that you actually had the choice to continue feeling a certain way or to maybe change those feelings.
Thank you, Gil. Mine was a long process. Growing up, I was always taught, you find the girl, you get married, you have children, you have the family, you work hard, and everything flows from there. Everything I was taught, whether it be in religion or in the movies, was once you get married, you put the rose-colored glasses on, everybody lives happily ever after. Every Disney movie, they fall in love, they get married, everything is wonderful. What they don't tell you is how hard it is to work through that relationship, how every day is a challenge, how all of those things, and that process wears you down because you're not expecting it at the time. At least I wasn't. Of course, I started when I was very young, and I had all the answers. And by the time I was 25, I had 3 kids, 3 jobs, and I didn't know a bloody honestly. And my father was a I knew because he was telling me this the whole time, and I kept telling him he was wrong. For me, it was survival for many, many, many years. My daughter had become ill, and then my wife was stricken with breast cancer, and so it was that caregiver role, and so I was in survival mode. And the awareness was what was in front of me at that moment, that day, that time, whatever crisis there was. My daughter, and then later on, my wife passed, and the reason I think that I really came to it was because after caregiving for so many years, and my wife passed, I was left alone for the very first time in my adult life. Scary as hell. I will tell you, it is scary. I always said when I was married that the scariest thing that would happen is if I were single again, because I didn't want to be single. I had no concept of what it was like to be without and by myself. And when you have long, prolonged discussions with your cat, and he doesn't really hang around much or say much, you realize that a lot more has to go on. And so I had been doing yoga. I started going into yoga with meditation. I went to counseling for 5 solid years, every week, virtually, with very few exceptions, every week for 5 years. And she was exceptional, and she wouldn't let me get away with a thing, and she scared the heck out of me because I never knew what was coming up. But she made me see those things that I had been hiding and pushing down for so long. And being able to see those parts of me that I didn't even realize were there. And those parts that came up that were there to protect me them as fear. And I learned those things when I was 8, when I was 15, when I was 22. I learned all of those things. But a 60-year-old man doesn't need those things. I did not need those fears coming up. So for me, it was an opening and an awakening of the different parts of me, all of those different aspects that I had that I just took for granted was there. I never realized I had a choice to listen to them or to just say, acknowledge them and say, thank you very much. I got this. And the impulses that I had, the caregiving, it was imprinted year after year after year. And I didn't know how to take care of myself because it was all outgo, very little income as far as care. If somebody needed something, all they had to do was call me. I put on my cape and I flew off, I solved the situation, and I saved the day, and I felt great about it. And I got back and I was exhausted and I went to bed. In that time, never doing anything for me. So when I was alone, all of a sudden, I had to realize who I was, what I was, find out who I was, and be able to give to me. I've used the expression that it's 1,000,000 miles from here to here. And for me, it took me 1,000,000 miles and many, many years to get there. And it was an extreme process and still is to this day. I work hard at it. Every day I get on the mat, whether I want to or not. I do yoga, I do the meditations, I do the clearing, I do the grounding, I do all of those things. And they only take 20 to 30 minutes a day, but it's that consistency to be able to maintain so that I can now, that I can see clearly, that I can see clearly, I can receive clearly, and I can be present with everyone else. Are there things that come up that are absolutely painstaking? Grief is one of those things that come up every once in a while. They surprise you. You walk around a corner, you see a picture, and grief comes up. And I used to try to very quickly try to tamp because I didn't want to deal with the grief. I didn't want to deal with the bad feelings. I didn't want to deal with the sorrow. And now it come up. And when that comes up, I have a smile. I have a smile simply not because I'm happy it happened, but because I am good with it. That I know that I did everything that I could through the course of my journey. I can't change anything about what happened, good or bad, but I'm okay with where I'm okay with my feelings. I'm okay that this comes up. It makes me realize that I'm human. And for that, I am so, so thankful.
Thank you for sharing that, Scott. And I just want to address a couple of things before we hear from Sarah. So it sounds to me like one of the important pieces that you spoke to was really getting support from a trusted guide. In this case, you mentioned your therapist as one of those guides, really helping you unpack, to use a coach word, and see that hidden truth.
Yeah.
And I think that's when we are able, sometimes in our journey, we're able to work through things on our own. And sometimes we really need that trusted guide who is a little bit outside or a lot outside of our own situation, who can really help us be honest with ourselves and to help us not necessarily point out those truths, but to help us reveal it for ourselves. And I think that's one of the things that I've experienced, one of the most valuable things that I've experienced on my own journey of healing and spirituality, is really being with coaches or therapists or guides or healers who aren't fixing us, right? They're not solving anything for us. They're really walking side by side as we're facing these things and feeling these things and helping us normalize our experience and letting us know you're human. This is okay. One of the pivotal points in my journey of healing, anyway, I'm not so much connected to spirituality, was in my 20s. I um, overdosed on alcohol and pills and ended up in a locked ward for 24 hours. And of course, I went to the group therapy there. And then I spoke to the psychiatrist who was there. And I was 24 years old. And this was the first time that anyone had, number one, heard about the abuse that I had gone through growing up. And the first time anyone had ever said to me, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. Now, I had dealt with bouts of depression and low self-worth and suicidal ideation for years leading up to this. And this was the first person who said to me, what you're feeling is normal, and there's actually nothing wrong with you. And all of it, I mean, it's not healthy to try to kill yourself, right? But given the fact that this has not been treated or addressed, it made total sense to him. And even just that moment of acknowledgement completely changed the trajectory for me. And I got into therapy and worked with that therapist. And it really sparked in me the beginning of looking at our physical health, our emotional health, our spiritual health in a very different way. Instead of like trying to run and hide and suppress, like really instead working with somebody or working on your own and having the courage to go deep within without beating yourself up over it. So, yeah, I really appreciate you, sharing your story and your journey. And I think that piece for the audience is sometimes you can go it alone, and sometimes there's nothing wrong with asking for help. So, Sarah, let's hear from you.
I suppose the story really started sort of with the accident when I was very young and spending my first birthday in hospital. And that was 65 years ago. The rules and regulations of the hospital that said my parents could only visit for an hour every other day, and the reality that I got to see them once a week for 3 months for an hour. And that maybe I struggle to feel in some respects because of that. Maybe the feelings were just so strong and at an age that there is no way that anybody could really help you, because what you required most was what was kept from you. And they know that now. That is why parents are encouraged to be with their children. And I get that, but the abuse of the system, and I understand that as the adult, but you could never, ever explain that to the child. Mum and dad love you. It's the system that won't let them see you. And circumstances. It's not that they are rejecting you. It is that there's nothing they can do about it either. And there's apparently 3 phases that children will go through. And very simplistically put, there's the naughty phase, which is when the child cries an awful lot. Really healthy, really good. And, it's as it should be. And that's great. That's fine. That's okay. There's the second phase where the child becomes quieter. That's when they start calling it the good phase. And it's just like, that's not good. But they do feel that's retrievable for the child. And then there's phase 3, where when the parents do come and visit, the child loses interest before they've even left. And my mother has absolutely confirmed I hit phase 3. and they actually consider that that's not possible to bring a child back from. Maybe this is why, sort of, with then my journey onwards, that coming home to a home that wasn't a new home, they'd moved in the process, so I didn't go home to familiar surroundings. My mother was pregnant with my sister Gillian, who was born and then died 9 weeks later. That was all by the time I was 18 months old. My sister Katie was born a year after Gillian was born. And because of what had happened with Gillian, she'd been classed as a cot death. So initially my parents were investigated. Then the autopsy revealed it was something the hospitals had missed. That was the reason for her death. But because of what happened with Gillian, how they were with Katie was totally different. Every little whimper, they went running. And understandably, from an adult's perspective, we can totally understand what they must have been going through. But that doesn't help the traumatized child. And I think about it, is the trauma actually the accident that put me there? That may be part of it, but is the trauma that feeling rejected, unwanted, unloved, not good enough? Because it's about the feelings. How did what happened make me feel? How's what's happened in your life made you feel? And it is about the feelings that it generated and engendered in us. And so did I go into the people pleasing, that desperately wanting people to like me, love me, and they would eventually wake up to the fact that I wasn't worthy loving, so I wanted everything yesterday. Oh, I was so much more of a mess than I realized. But, that's fine. It was a journey I was meant to go through. 2 marriages behind me. It is what it is. My life has been what it's been. But the wake-up call came with a broken jaw. 6 months of pain and sleepless nights. I hadn't got the energy to, gratefully I didn't have children, to work full-time. I was studying an accounting exam. I was running the home because he did diddly squat in it. I'd come home from work and find him sitting watching the television, soap operas and goodness knows what else, rather than he hadn't got the nous or the know-how to even think about cooking and getting tea ready. And it was just like, and I was a people pleaser. And it's just like something had to give, and most of it gave, to be perfectly honest, because I gave up the studying to start with, but then I sort of suddenly realized actually I can give up the people pleasing, and giving up the people pleasing meant I gave up the husband. So it didn't happen quickly, it didn't happen overnight, but it did happen. And in the process of ending my marriage, we then got told we were being made redundant because the company had been taken over. So talk about having a whole load of stuff happen. But actually, I was in that place because with the wake-up call, I'd started to take control of my life. And I have very few memories of my early years because I was so unhappy. So I have no memories of feeling. No, but I care so much about others. So there is feeling there. It's just that maybe I have to give it different words and accepting that about myself. But in the process of breaking up my marriage, and my mother's reaction was, yeah, so you'll regret this. You're obviously going through an early menopause or something. You've got to go to the doctor. And obviously I kept going to the doctor because of the sleep and the lack of sleep and pain. And when I broke up the marriage, it was just like, why have I been the way I've been? Why have I reacted in this way? And so I did ask to go and see a therapist. And I had to go through a psychologist to get to a psychotherapist. And they put me on Prozac. At the time, I was silly enough to actually take it, but do you know what? It didn't do anything because I was actually already in that high of taking control of my own life. So it wasn't going to do a thing anyway. So it was fine. It was just like, actually, do you know what? This is my life. I can start doing things. And when my mother turned around and I'd rung her and said, the marriage is over, it said, look what you're giving up. I beg your pardon. Just because we'd got a house with a £5,000 mortgage on it, and this was back in the 1990s. So, sort of £5,000, owned everything in it, car each, 3 holidays a year, and look what you're giving up. This isn't about things, it's about me. It's about me being happy in my life. And I'm not. I feel like a slave in my own home. Why would I want to stay in it? And so I asked to see a psychotherapist. And I only went, I think, for about 10 months. I asked because I'd got a reason. And that reason was why? What has happened in my life that I have been the way I've been? And when I had to stop because I'd moved, she was in Northampton, I'd moved down to Bournemouth. And she said to me on that last appointment, she said, what you have achieved in 10 months, most people can't achieve in 2 years. But that was the mindset and the intention that I went in with. And I loved being on my own. I absolutely loved it. Because for the first time, I didn't need others. It wasn't about needing others. It was about me. It was about being able to relax fully in a space that was mine. And I don't feel I'd ever truly relaxed before that. And so we all come at these things with different experiences. Yes, I was raised a Catholic, very much in that sort of, that era of, you're meant to be the little wife, tied to the kitchen sink, sort of, and obviously with the gentlemen, they were meant to be the ones to go out and be the breadwinners. But at that period of time, within that period of time, that it wasn't just about being the wife at home, it was about women were going out to work and were earning a living. And we are very much a part of what is a home these days and a household these days. So it's finding ourselves and being true to ourselves. And that was just the start of my healing.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I'm hearing in both your story and Scott's, and I think this is probably true for me and David as well, is there we have been presented with these circumstances and these experiences to help us really understand who we truly are, and what we're truly capable of. And at the same time, we've had experiences where we have taken on either what other people say we are or who we are, or Sarah, I mean, it totally makes sense that as a, what was it, a toddler, right? How could you not feel in some way the way that you felt? I mean, it's a complicated, complex situation. And how clever of your young self to do what you needed to do to endure and get through that situation. And I think that this is, just part of the human condition, that our our minds are here to protect us. They're here to protect us, and we come up with all these brilliant strategies to survive. We get into trouble when we're carrying it into our 20s and 30s and 50s and 60s. Scott, to your point about I didn't need these survival strategies anymore. And we've all had the good fortune of number one, I think, having curiosity about, wait a minute, how do I really feel about this? Who am I really? What do I really want out of life? I think that that's, and we'll talk more about the power of curiosity, but I think that that's really a big piece of the healing journey, is to break out of those learned behaviors and the narratives that we tell ourselves or that we believe from others, and really take a stand and say, wait a minute, do I have this right? Does this actually feel true for me? And then from that point, starting to not only be curious, but to get committed. And that's what I'm hearing from you, Sarah, is that you had gotten to a point where you were so committed. You didn't need the Prozac, the like, that's kind of, I don't know what it's like in the UK, but in the US, it's the same thing. Like I went to, when I was going through some things, I'd say about 4 or 5 years ago, I wanted to go through the physical aspects. Like, is there something going on physically? Yes. So I went to a doctor. I also thought, like, I don't know, maybe this is early menopause. Like, what's going on here? Maybe I should have my hormone levels checked. Like, I've got all the things I said I wanted in life, and I'm not at all happy. So, a lot of these things are trapped energy. A lot of these have spiritual roots or soul wounding roots. And it's still important to check the physical vessel. Same thing happened to me. I met with this woman who's supposedly the top menopause doctor in the area. Did not take any blood work, did not ask me 2-3 questions, didn't want to check thyroid levels, none of that stuff. She didn't want to do any of that. She simply said, I can write you a prescription for Prozac. And I said, no, thank you. Because by then, in my journey, I had been exposed to all kinds of different modalities of healing. And I was like, you know what? We're just not the right fit. I'll go talk to a therapist. I'll go talk to my healer friends. But to go from barely asking any questions to, I'll just write you a prescription. To me, that's not really getting to the root of what is going on. And what I hear from you, Sarah, what I hear from you, Scott, and I'm sure I would hear it from David too, is a lot of these physical issues that we struggle with, emotional issues, mental issues, many, maybe not all, but many have so much to do with unresolved trauma and the fear of really feeling what's going on in our bodies, and the thought process that we have based on unhealthy, dysfunctional experiences that have happened in our lives.
So you talked about curiosity, and one of the things that I was at a ball game with my grandson, and we were sitting next to this young couple. They had just gotten engaged. He looked at me and says, "Are you married?" "Yeah, 40 years." "Well, with your experience, what do you think is the most important thing of marriage?" I looked at him with 2 things: a shared sense of humor. And he looked at me, it's kind of strange. And I said, if you take a whipped cream pie and you put it in her face, and she doesn't think it's funny, and you do, you have a very big problem. You have to have a shared sense of humor about what life is, because life is going to throw so many things at you. And it's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of sharing. A shared sense of humor is a matter of intimacy. with your partners. I'm sure say is two words and they start laughing because they're on the inside joke. You have that same sense of what appeals to you and what's funny. The other is what keeps you young, and that is curiosity. If you maintain a sense of curiosity, of learning, of wanting to grow every single day, that you bring that with your bring that with you into your relationship, you bring that into your life, and you can be not the most boring person in the room. Curiosity spawns you are the most what was the beer ad, the most interesting person in the world. But it helps you maintain that youth, that intensity, that sense of wonder. I think as most of us get older, you lose that. But I find that myself, that curiosity, travel for me just spawns all of that. All my senses go on overload, and I want to see it, I want to smell it, I want to touch it, I want to inhale wherever I am, and it brings that sense of passion and that sense of joy and that sense of curiosity. All those feelings I didn't know I had. I just thought I was supposed to do this. I'm always going to do this. This is the path of my life. I shouldn't, because that's what's expected. And so therefore my parents lived in the same house for 55 years. After my father retired, they went once to Florida, and he was retired for 25 years and never went anywhere else because it was easier to stay home. And I swore that I would never do that. I wanted to bring up one thing with Joe Dispenza that I was reading about quantum physics. Nothing happens without observation. It's if a person is present, things will change because of that observation. And the second part of that is that nothing will change without emotion. We bring emotion to our life. We bring emotion. Emotion is what changes how our life appears in so many aspects. And so while emotions can be good, bad, indifferent, all the way around, it's the human experience. I suppressed those emotions for so long because I needed to be the rock. I needed to be even. I couldn't get too high. I couldn't get too low. So therefore, I worked really hard within that very small bandwidth. And I stayed there because everybody around me was all over the place, and I had to be that rock. Now my bandwidth is, you can't even see it because I go anywhere. Last year to India, I was called to go. And so for 21 days, I was in a foreign land, not understanding any of the languages, the multiple languages that were spoken, not just open to anything that came along. And if I had tried to do that 8 years earlier, I would have failed miserably. But because I went there last year, fully invested in me and ready for it, I just learned so much. I could just accept so many things that I didn't even knew I could. Apparently, it's somebody else's turn.
I think with me, when I sort of took the bull by the horns and sort of out of my marriage, and then I took sort of a secondment down to the Bournemouth, which is now where I live, with the company to help that to change over the merging of the two companies. And it's just like I took redundancy and walked straight into a new job. 6 days between, and that was over Easter period too. So yeah, I know it was brilliant. It really was. The universe, because I had taken the courage to say, that's not working in my life. That is no longer for me. The things that then happened over a period of time, it didn't all happen sort of within sort of minutes or within days, and then it was, okay, what do I learn for me? But I also started getting involved in things, different things that I would never, ever have done. I abseiled off the water tower in the local area called Poole. I'd never done anything like that before. I got involved with a school project and helping youngsters set up their own little business. I then went on a trip to Romania to track wolves and lynx in the Carpathian Mountains with the Carpathian Large Carnivore Project for 2 weeks. So no, it was not to do with killing them. I would never have anything to do with that. It was about the science of it. I became a member at the UK Wolf Conservation Trust, and I actually became a trainee handler working with the wolves. And I have done I've done other sort of things, like sort of flown a helicopter and sort of done a wing walk and various and zip wires. It's life is about experiencing, and I hadn't done. I'd been to Greece a couple of times, and sort of my second marriage, we've been to Switzerland a few times. Beautiful. I love Switzerland. There's certain parts of Switzerland. It's not that I'd done nothing. It's just that I hadn't fully been a part of the doing of that. And so for my 50th birthday, I treated myself to going to Egypt on my own. And with the hope that I would see, in fact, I'd hoped to get to Cairo and to the Sphinx and the pyramids. I didn't on that occasion, but I did end up by going back with the family. But again, on my own from where we were staying, I flew to Cairo with a group. And I got to see the Sphinx and the pyramids and into the museum in Cairo. So I've got out of that fear of doing things on my own. It's just like, let's go out, have an experience. The experiences don't have to be that huge. The experience, I sort of always wanted to be able to throw a pot and sort of, make sort of just something sort of with pottery. And I got to do that as well. I have 3 amazing pieces that I made, and I've got those, So I've got the proof that I did it. And she looked at me and she said, "Are you sure you've never done this before?" Just like, "No, I haven't." But so it's about experiencing life. What are you prepared to do? Snorkeling in Egypt. I haven't been scuba diving, but snorkeling in Egypt, I've never done that before. It was great. What you could see under the water. It's take the challenges, create the challenges, actually, not just take life chucks enough challenges at us, but create challenges for yourself. I've walked the 3 highest peaks in the UK. So in England, Scotland, and in Wales. I've been up all 3 of them, not all in 24 hours or even in the same week, but I've done them all. It's, what are you allowing yourself to do? What speaks to you? And they can really help you to, yes, I've done this, sort of, I can achieve. And I suppose that was always one of the big things is, I was good at an awful lot of stuff that I've done. I was really good at it, but I had no confidence in me. And by taking these challenges, it's just like, I did it. And it hasn't got to be about work. It hasn't got to be about relationships and friendships or family. It can be about having some fun.
I have some new. I have renewed respect for you, young lady.
Yeah, we want to hear more about your adventures. That's amazing. And really what I'm hearing in that, Sarah, too, is that healing brings more life, brings more opportunities. Yes, brings more challenges. I want to touch in on that, because that's kind of how this whole topic was inspired. Is just because you're on a healing journey or a spiritual journey, that doesn't mean that everything is unicorns and rainbows after a certain level of healing is accomplished. But really what I'm hearing from you is that when you were willing to stop and reflect and really decide and commit to the kind of life you wanted to live when you really stepped into it. And that's just one of the many benefits of being on a healing journey. And I think a lot of people get stuck in the status quo, or they don't want to go there because they're afraid of those feelings that they've been running from, they've been hiding from. They know it's going to hurt. It already hurt, whatever the source of that pain was. It already hurt. They don't want to hurt again. And yet it's kind of a chronic hurt.
Mm.
And having the courage, as you spoke to, Sarah and Scott, having the courage to go there and to work with it, and the curiosity. I think we all kind of started with the why, right? We ended up in therapy and trying to understand, like, why am I like this? Or why does this happen to me? And graduating into, okay, I have an understanding of why maybe I think the things I think, or the things that I do, and things aren't really shifting all that much. It's really graduating into, okay, well, what do I need to know about this? What do I want to do about this? So it's going beyond the why, but the why really helps us have a better understanding and acceptance of, you know what, that was really kind of a lousy situation. And it's okay. It's okay that I felt sad or angry or scared. And I don't need to feel that way anymore. So now what? What information can I take from this? How can I use those feelings to create something, like you're saying, Sarah, create something I want, a challenge I want, an experience I want. So I love that you shared that side of you with us. And it sounds amazing. It's like, talk about really living and being alive. Like, that's what it's all about. That's on the other side of going through that healing process, whether you're going through it for the first time or you're going through it for the 100th time. It's worth it to feel through that process and go through that process. Now, I know we're kind of running up to the end of the hour already. I feel like we could go for another 3 hours, but I really want to get to talking about spiritual bypassing, because that was something that sparked this topic, and that we all had very passionate discussion about in the planning meeting. And really, there's what I have noticed is that there's all kinds of options for people to do healing work. And I think with the popularity of The Secret, when that came out in the early 2000s, people really got on the bandwagon of manifesting, right? Like creating the life that they want, but it was really geared more towards manifesting things that they want. And so I think that, this idea of being on the spiritual path and being able to create the life you want is exciting, and it gets people interested. And there's a lot of stuff out there that is considered spiritual and healing that really isn't. And it's not to judge it, because like that's how I kind of came into it myself. I had some knowledge leading up to it, but really the secret and sort of talking to people, Abraham Hicks was another gateway for me to go deeper into my spirituality. So I'm not knocking it. We all have different points of entry. The more you're on this journey, though, the more you realize that because you're choosing to be on a spiritual path, it doesn't necessarily mean you're never going to have difficult times. I went through one of the most challenging times of my life last year. It brought me to my knees. And the whole point is to really not get caught up in those learned behaviors, those automatic responses, and to feel what it like, really truly feel and move that energy through you, not ignore it, not kid yourself and say, you know what, I'm all love and light. I never feel angry. I never feel jealousy. I never feel these lower aspects of myself. No, it's about integrating all of you, all of the feelings, all of your personality, all of your aspects, and embracing that. Not necessarily acting out on it, but really, truly accepting that. And I was talking with someone yesterday about the story of the two wolves. Speaking of wolves, the two wolves who live inside of us. And I've heard two versions of that story. And one of them is the grandson asks the grandfather who wins, and the answer is the one you feed. But I've heard another version of that that says you feed them both. You feed them both, because no matter which one you feed, if you're not feeding the other one, that's going to be the starving one, and that's the one that's going to be running the show. So with that being said, like let's talk a little bit about the spiritual bypassing before we need to kind of wrap up, because I know that this was a pretty lively discussion in our planning. Scott, it looks like you want to chime in here.
The spiritual bypassing. There's about 17 different aspects, but is that what you aren't prepared for necessarily is when you have this awakening, when you have this understanding, when you have this presence within yourself, and you know fully who yourself, and you're expressing yourself, all of a sudden you are expressing yourself differently. Your personality may come across differently. It may come across as higher or lower, to the left, to the right, quieter, more loud, depending on what's coming out of you. And the people closest around you are the ones that are going to be the most affected. And they aren't necessarily clued in that here's a new you coming through. there are changes. You lose. There will be people who walk away because they don't know this new you, and they don't know the reason why there's a change. There will be people who will come into your life. There will be change because they are attracted to the different position that you're at. And there is change. I was always taught that it's when you talk to people, it's about learning, about healing, about walking forward. It's not about change. I talked to my sister about change, and she looked at me and said, "No one likes change, and you couldn't possibly like change." And I said, "No, I embrace it. Change is constant. If you ignore it, if you put up the walls around it, and you don't want to do anything different, you will just stagnate. Change is what brings you forward." And for that, I guess my time is up again. And that's where
We can still hear you.
That it's reshaping your life constantly. Sarah?
It's about growth for me, moving beyond where we are. And there's those sayings, aren't there? Sort of find the positivity in everything, sort of find the reasons. And I am one of those people. It was Neil Donald Walsh in Conversations with God that really, really supported me to go deeper into it. And it's thinking, but I don't look at things and say, all right, that's happened, there's got to be something positive. I do, I say that, but it's okay, I know I've still got to go through this. And earlier this year, boy, they have put me through it, sort of, and they really have put me through, and it's just, that's okay, fine. And actually, I'm going to be far better off because they have put me through it. But it's been a really tough thing to go through. But it's okay, accept the fact I haven't got any choice. Things have happened. out of my control. And that's what we have to realize. There is so much in life that is out of our control. Our reactions and our behavior to those things are in our control. But other people and systems are involved. And when you've got technology, we had a classic example with it tonight, or tonight for me, because that's not in our control. So much in life isn't. And so it's, okay, how can I make the best of this? What's this teaching me? How can I grow from this? It's not a matter of, oh, right, there's got to be something positive about this, so I can just ignore it. There's no ignoring anything, because if you ignore it, it's going to come back and bite you even blooming harder. It really is. If the universe is trying to get your attention, if you don't listen, it really will get your attention. Yeah, I think that's where my broken jaw. Had they been trying to give me hints all the time and I wasn't listening because I really didn't understand. So I ended up with a broken jaw and the 6 months of pain and sleepless nights, because it was the only way they could get my attention. They say if something comes at you 3 times, and it may come at you slightly differently, but if it comes at you 3 times, the universe is speaking to you. It's time to listen. Because if you don't listen, if the universe really wants to get through to you, and believe me, it will get through to you, and you aren't going to like how it does it. None of us like how the universe does it. But I'm also a great believer, and we've chosen experiences to have, and we aren't going to get round them. We aren't going to get over them. We aren't going to get under them. We've got to go through them. And it is really important to go through these experiences in the best way we can. And we can learn and grow from them if we allow ourselves.
I really appreciate the distinction that you made, Sarah, between being curious about the wisdom and about the message or the invitation in the experience versus, I'm going to borrow a phrase from around here. I don't know if you have this phrase in the UK, but versus putting lipstick on a pig, and just pretending, oh, it's okay, everything's fine, I'm fine. And I love that you brought up today, right? So here's like on the court example of as a situation out of our control. The situation is out of David's control. And David reached out to all of us. My reception of his communication with me, I definitely felt like the anxiety rise up in me. Like, oh my gosh, now I got to run the show, and David, I love you. And this is not a knock. If he were here, he would know that this is not a knock against him. But I had that moment, and I had to allow myself to feel whatever it was I was feeling in that moment versus pretending I was okay, because in that moment, I really wasn't okay. And I knew, like, if I tried to block that and get on, it wouldn't be the same show. So I had to allow myself that moment, not get taken away by it, but then to really remember it. You can do this. It will be fine. You have Sarah, you have Scott. This is a collaboration. For goodness sake, I was a journalist for many years. Like, I think I can handle this, So it's a small example of the bigger topic that we're talking about, is to really be clear about yourself, what you're feeling, allow those feelings, accept that, move the energy through you, and then really get curious about, what is this all about here? What opportunity might come out of this? And now you're creating an experience. So we are at 59 minutes. So I'm going to give you each a chance to share any last thoughts, and we'll be wrapping up for this month. So Scott, we'll go to you.
If I can go, because I must go.
Oh, Sarah, I'm
You go.
sorry. Right, you got to go.
Okay.
Go ahead. You go first.
I'm just going to throw in some light language. Let it speak to your heart and your soul, folks. Ka tash tana ka te ikiti miaka, toramata ish tana ka to mayaya, thehas tana ka tai ishi, te na katakate enishi manakatea, not to tokoromanaki, nata tana ka shti, yoshayanaka, ne ta aktoi ishai, mota yakata, fe hunteran jishtia. Namaste. I can't translate it. It's heart and soul to understand. Thank you, guys. Scott, I'll see you shortly. Thank you, Gail. It's been a real pleasure. You've done brilliantly.
Bye. See you next month.
Bye.
So when we talk about all of this, the feel to heal, it's that part of the understanding that your heart is not a lockbox, that your heart is open, that your heart is infinite in its ability for love, unconditional love, love without strings, and that all those, and a lot of people do what I did, and that was put bad emotions, those emotions I didn't want to deal with, put them away, put them in a lockbox, throw the key away, and make sure, hopefully you'll never find it so you never have to open it again. But it's that healing that will happen only if you fully feel those aspects of yourself, all those aspects, and understand them and be curious and not get taken by the 5D, not be taken by all of the higher vibrational, but to make sure you stay within yourself, to know yourself, to be able to do all this work. And Gail, you did a beautiful job. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your support. And David, thank you for the opportunity and providing us a great real world live example of the topic that we were discussing today. So that was Feel to Heal. We will see you again next month. Bye.